Well, I'm at that age now where I can be even more opinionated, and I think it's actually a huge symptom of the decline of Western civilization. That's how serious it is, right?
If shit really hits the fan, are they going to give you your Bitcoin? What I would say too as well is I actually don't think that politicians, for the most part, in most societies, not all, are in control. I actually think the corporations are. This is the Mooncast.
See you, Space Cowboy.
Welcome, man. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it has. It has, man. You look a little bit different, actually.
Been working out, trying to lose weight. Uh, I'm on the journey. 6 kg down, another 25 to go.
Yeah, I was like, something about you looks a little bit. So how
Got a
long
bit
have
of
you
a
been
crappy mustache as
retransforming?
well.
Oh,
But seriously taking it for about a month. Generally, just was unfit and unhealthy, so I decided to make the move. But the discipline is sticking. Started with diarising and watching the calories and just generally being mobile. You know how it is when you're building stuff. You're sitting in front of a computer for 16 to 20 hours a day, right? And
yeah.
then the free time you get, I'm running around with the kids, but that's not really running around. So you're not getting any workouts. But now I actually make the time for it, so it's good.
Yeah, no, it's nice to see you on your healthy journey because I always like to tell people too as well that health is way more important than the amount of wealth or whatever it is that you build because who cares what you're building if you're gonna die in a week because you've just been eating potato chips all day and you haven't moved your body. I don't think we were naturally meant to do that as humans and just to sit around.
I actually ate quite healthily, a little bit too much, but mostly healthy food. It's just, unfortunately, if you don't do any exercise, it quickly catches up with you. And if I go to my well, let's go 15 years ago, I was doing MMA, three 3 hour sessions a week, and I had a six pack and I was fit. And previously to that, in my youth, I was a rugby player and did other martial arts. So it's like I went from being fit to getting a huge amount of injuries. And then when I first got to Indonesia, I had a motorbike accident and broke some ribs, my wrists, and I was out of condition for about 6 months. And
Yeah.
after that, I just found it so difficult to start again. My wife is a yoga instructor, and I've even started to do yoga with her, but I was getting injuries during the warm up for yoga. I mean, it
Wow.
was just really, really bad, just mounting and mounting and mounting. So, long story short, middle age catches us all, and it's like, okay, I need to do it. And I actually just found a nice little balance. I'm doing kind of relatively low weights compared to what I used to do, but really high reps. And it's just rebuilding my core strength and rebuilding all the stuff that I used to have. Certainly nowhere near a six pack. I used to say I had a six pack. Now I have a keg.
Oh man.
Well,
No.
four kids to run around with. I don't really want them to. I want to be around to see my grandchildren. The youngest is 2, so that means I've got to really push to maintain some health for the long term. And it actually helps with the creative and the brainstorming and the building process. If you just take time away from it and do something that is a repetitive physical activity, it actually clears the brain so you can focus in on some elements better. So it's all benefiting the building process.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Hey, just keep populating, brother. Keep populating.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I believe that's one of our main purposes of existence. I got 4 boys. I'd like a girl. The missus wants a girl, so hey, it's fun trying anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm on my procreation journey too as well. So I plan
Yes,
to start. Well, I'm building a property. So once it's finished, then I plan to start procreating
I
shortly.
used to plan this kind of stuff actually. When I was a teenager, I was like, I want to be married by the time I'm 25. I want 3 kids. Blah 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 blah. Obviously, that didn't happen. I got married relatively late the first time, and what I actually discovered is, and realized definitely by living in Indonesia, is you don't need to plan all the wealth and the ideal scenarios for having a child. because it is the most natural thing we can do, and we always find a way. Life finds a way. In some ways, life generates a whole new, I want to say, reality, or like kind of spiritual vibe, where that law of attraction comes. You have a child, so then you will be able to feed your child. It's very, very difficult for some who aren't in that situation, of course, but the vast majority of people who go and have kids bring and are trying to actively parent their kids do bring their kids up. There's more and more people every day, and
Yeah.
they come from all sorts of backgrounds, wealthy backgrounds, poor backgrounds, faithful, not faithful. So the reality is, I think just having the child is absolutely fine. You don't need to overthink the process, man. Just do
Yeah. And
it.
I think that also it maybe is a slight nuance maybe culturally too as well, because you look at in Indonesia or just more global South countries, they
Yes.
tend to be a little bit more communal, whereas
Yes.
yeah, so I think that helps too as well in terms, because it takes a village to raise a child, like that one phrase. So if when you have a kid, it's like, oh well, your mom, your sister, your brother, your auntie, your everybody will chip in to try to help. Whereas in the global north, I find the culture a little bit more. It's just different, I'd say it's more individualistic.
Well, I'm at that age now where I can be even more opinionated, and I think it's actually a huge symptom of the decline of Western civilization. That's how serious it is, right? And the reality is, they're scrabbling around all these artificial constructs. Even if you let's not hate on America, but let's look at America briefly. It's only got 200 years of history, so, and it is quite a refined, or let's say filtered history in terms of the population makeup, because a lot of people who think the same way have gone to the same place to think that way,
Yeah,
non-conformist, and so on. So
correct.
you've got this like kind of hyper individualistic environment,
Yeah,
and it's eroding the fabric of community on a proper scale, to the point where they totally mistrust any governmental attempts to treat the nation as a community, because they're so individualistic. And then you've got so many single interest groups that everybody is divided again and then again and then again, and nobody's looking at the bigger picture. And the flip side of that is, when you do want to look at a bigger picture, they kind of do it in, and I have to qualitatively say, subjectively say, the wrong ways. Because I don't think there's anything wrong with a sense of nationalism in terms of wanting to help everybody where you are behind your mythological border,
yeah,
which I'm not pro. But doing so when everybody else is born on the other side of a mythological border is not the way to do it, right? It's
yeah,
not the intelligent way to do it, because there isn't any difference between me and somebody who was born literally half a mile across an invisible line. So
yeah,
I think people need to wake up to the reality of humanity and the earth, and that we are all on one rock. And
yeah,
it doesn't really matter if you're from that rock or this rock. You're still the same people. You still bleed red. Doesn't
yeah,
matter, black, brown, Chinese, any possible variation people want to do, even into the whole woke mind virus stuff of new constructed genders and new constructed whatever it is. The reality is, do what you want to do, but you're still a person.
yeah,
And people should treat people on their individual merits, not on a generic stereotype of what you think about that person. Sorry. So,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not really. How can I put it? I don't think I'm in with the current fashion of very much. Look at them, they're wrong. I'm not
yeah.
into that.
Same, same. I think life is very gray. I think that what's happening to
So is my
Western
hair.
society, yeah, like yeah. But it looks good though. It looks good. Like, dude, I
Sixty
like the
percent
slick
color.
back.
It's
Yeah.
60% color, right? So it's actually a lot grayer if I didn't color it, but
Would you ever dye it?
I do.
Oh, okay, okay.
60% of it is colored, right? I mean, I did color it more, but when I cut it, as I did coming onto your podcast, wanting to represent, all of the color's gone. So the sides are very grey, and the top has still got some of the sort of browny black in it.
Yeah.
But this is not a fashion tip show, right?
Yeah. No, no, but really though, life is it's very very. There's a lot of gray areas. I think that what's happening to Western civilization now currently is maybe some form of karma, for kind of what's kind of happened in the past, in terms of history, true history, if you really understand.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but
Look, colonialism, and the thing is, then that if you even want to talk on that stuff and talk about how the current race riots and the whole anti-immigration things, like,
yeah,
hey guys, a lot of people weren't happy when you guys were invading other countries, and as part of the issue, 2/3 of the world belong to England, and the reason why my father only ever had a British passport is because England went and took over that area of the world at one point,
Yeah.
and so only ever had a British passport, went to Britain when he was 16. So I suppose that segues nicely into why I live in Indonesia today. I am Muslim, right? And
Yeah.
I could see this rhetoric of otherism, let's call it, where people are looking at outsiders and other people and saying, you lot are different, it's your fault for the problems of the decline of that civilization or that society. And it
Hmm.
happens, you look at it in history, even always they're like, it's the barbarians on the outside. It's never the barbarians on the outside. It's always the lack of ability of the incumbents or the society itself to deliver on its own rhetoric and hype that then leads to the decline. And the reality is, those countries are not procreating enough. And if they're not procreating enough, then their entire civil structure cannot economically survive because there aren't enough taxpayers. And
Exactly.
sure, importing new people to work and then they hope to pay taxes is a strategy that they seem to be adopting in the EU and Western nations. And they're going to have to do it in Japan, otherwise the country will disappear, right? But it's not necessarily expected that those people who are now imported to provide your tax base for your retirement or the people now's retirement, they're not all going to be able to work straight away. And they're not all going to acclimatize or, and I hate this word, assimilate. Do you know how many people on crypto Twitter talk about assimilation when they talk about this kind of stuff? And the reality is, the Borg in Star Trek are the bad guys. Nobody wants assimilation. And they think the diversity is a negative because all they see is their own culture being eroded. But you are the
Yes.
keepers of your own culture, not other people. If,
Yeah.
if you have a culture and you feel strong about it, then practice it and believe in it and spread it amongst your people. And if you do find people who wish to adopt your culture, that's great. But you can't tell other people not to do their culture because
Yeah.
it's up to them what they want to do.
Did you know that smart contract developers make around $120,000 per year? We are building the biggest Web3 talent pool in Africa, linking you to companies looking to outsource cheaper labor. Find out and join us at helico.xyz. And as always, see you, Space Cowboy.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I have the same exact assessment on everything you just said too as well. And I could even take it a step further as what exactly is British culture? You know?
Well, it's an amalgamation because we've been invaded so often. We're part Roman, part Norman, part Viking.
Yeah,
And it's just, I tell you what British culture meant to me when I was a kid, right? It was
yeah,
manners and respect.
yeah,
British culture was having a sense of superiority that meant you were a gentleman. And that sense of superiority was backed up by having a world-leading empire. So
yeah,
people had earned a bit of a right to say, well, we're British, we used to run the world, right?
yeah,
But if you then squander that, and I tell you, one of the big things I think is a detriment to society, the praising and the adulation of mediocrity and horribleness, right? And I'm talking about things like reality TV, right?
yeah,
Which is the knife in the heart of the original sense of what it meant to be gentlemanly, right? It's like, okay, no, we
hmm,
can praise these people who are inverted commas lower class and celebrate these things that they're doing that are not in fitting with what we used to perceive as being as aspirational things. And
yeah,
now you brought a whole new bunch of people that aspire to a much lower bar than they used to. And it's like,
yeah,
well, these kind of controversial things might get me in a bit of trouble to say these kind of things because I'm just saying that lowest common denominator mass appeal stuff doesn't give anything higher for people to aspire to be or to try and project their ability to, or even social mobility and all this kind of stuff. People try to make everybody's middle class, but they're not. Some people
yeah,
are working class, and that should be honored and revered because without people who are working class, there would be nothing else. Society needs all of these elements, which is
yeah,
perhaps somewhat communist to think about. Respect everybody. The dustbin guy, the guy who sweeps the streets, is a vital part of society and should be appreciated as such. Probably more so than a footballer, but hey, free market capitalism and all this kind of stuff. Footballers entertain, they get paid a lot of money. But nurses and doctors saves lives and do not get paid a lot of money.
yeah,
And there is a problem with that in the society, and people are given all these mixed messages, which is somewhat imported from that whole non-conformist American hyper capitalism. That
hmm,
if you have money, you've justified your existence. If
yeah,
you have money, you've achieved something.
Yeah.
But I think if you've helped loads of people, you've achieved something. And if you have money, well, lots of people can get money. Look at all the reality people with money.
Yeah.
And people who maybe haven't had such a big impact on society.
Yeah, I think the same too as well. I think our thoughts pretty much align when it comes to getting money versus social impact. Those are two completely separate things. And I try to break these things down to people where they can kind of understand them. And when you look at the global north and you look at the decreasing aging population that they have, you look at the fact that they don't really have any natural resources, look at the fact that the currency itself is crashing, and that's kind of the main thing that they kind of control and leverage to the global south to extract a natural resource for cheap, etc. Where do you think things are headed for the global north in the next 10 or so odd
We are
years?
we're in a rebalancing, and we've been, like I said, it started before I meandered off on one of my digressions. The reason why I moved to Indonesia is I saw all of this type of stuff coming, and I could see that Indonesia was going to explode, had all of the right ingredients to do so. And the reality is, in the 10 years I've been here, Indonesia's gone from G9 to G5 and is about to displace the UK. The ingredients for that were an extremely young population and a high technology infiltration into society. 98% of Indonesians have a smartphone. This means that even if the society and its education system is slow to adapt, it doesn't matter, because the access to international resources for education is there for absolutely everybody. And this is one of the things I love about decentralization, because if it's one person trying to make money out of spreading knowledge, that's not a good thing. But if the knowledge is available relatively freely, okay, it's for ads on YouTube or whatever, but it's there, it's out there, it's accessible. That means people are empowered to go and do it themselves. And ironically, that's kind of what I believe the capitalistic idea should be looking at, giving as many people as possible the equality of opportunity to succeed. That's why we're stuck in this money paradigm, which I don't like from our previous discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually did a three-part series on what is money to break that down to people and why
Nice.
they shouldn't really shouldn't be chasing that specifically. That was the kind of
Yeah.
the goal. The more people that can understand that, I think the more better because the way the mechanisms of money work, if you understand them, it's forever increasing supply of something. So it's, for lack of a better term, a shit coin. So
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because I do many white papers for many projects, and I've
yeah.
always wrestled with the concept of all of this kind of stuff. My project is closer to be discussed, the overreaching one, but not quite there. But as a little snippet, I can tell you, we do understand that money supply is important and needs to be managed rather than just finite. And that's a thing that Bitcoiners will be like, what? But I don't think having a finite supply is the solution. I've got some inclinations I'm still working out and gaming out, but I
Yeah.
believe an elastic supply to a hard cap is the hybrid that is required. So that is to say, and I'm not talking exact numbers here, but just to give you the concept. If there is a hard cap on the number of tokens or money that is available, and there is a reduction of money function built into the system, but there is also a resupply of money built into the system. So how it applies in credit, which is the name of the token that it will be, there is a hard cap of 100 million tokens. And if each individual person is a validation node, but there aren't that many people, then you don't need that much supply. But the tokens that are required to be a validation node are automatically burnt after a period of time. I'm not going to give you all the details there, but we know what we want to do. So let's say you've got them arbitrarily, let's say 10 months. It won't be 10 months, but I'm just saying that now. So 10 months comes, the tokens that were on, say, a device, without giving too much away, are burned, and then suddenly the supply has gone down. But now you've increased the number of users. So the number of people are users equal validation nodes in this paradigm. So if the user is a validation node, they need some degree of tokens in order to earn the rewards to validate on the network, in order for them to have a reason as to why they have the hardware. But you're reducing algorithmically the number of tokens that they require in order to do the validations, to the point eventually where it'll be less than one token, right? But the point is that is a minting operation. So you mint when there's more hardware for more users. You're burning at the end of a validation period. You distribute rewards that enables people to maybe purchase the next upgrade of the hardware, but not necessarily paying any extra amount of money, or certainly being able to do so with their rewards. And then you're creating a network which has a virtuous cycle built within it. And more importantly, there's no reason to value extract or leech value from the system. You kept it closed in a finite number of users initially. And as that system grows, it's instead of miners, basically, you're just saying users is the mechanism for bringing new tokens in, but the algo won't let it go above a hard cap. Now,
Yeah.
I don't want to get into it too much because we're not launching that until I hope next year. But that is going to be, I would hope, the most decentralized coin in existence. Because if every holder is a validation node, that should be, I think, a new fairness paradigm. That because people think that we get to Bitcoin and we've evolved to this point, and it is the best thing by far in terms of decentralization that exists in the world of cryptocurrency. But that doesn't mean there's not going to be another one, or there's not going to be a new, better paradigm. And Bitcoin will always have a good reason to exist as a store of value. But I don't necessarily think it's ideal for daily transactions and generally the money of everyday life. That's what I'm trying to work on. But let's not talk about that too much yet.
Yeah. No, it's a very interesting thing. I just look at when I think about Bitcoin, I just think about it from the perspective of not allowing governments to fund wars and not allowing governments to sanction other countries, so that the people, to make it hard for international companies in those countries to do business with other international companies, which had nothing to do with the discord that your government and the other government had, So I see Bitcoin as like kind of that opt out of, I just don't want to play in your little game.
But don't you see that now they, inverted commas, are starting to get their fingers all over it? Everyone was clamoring for ETFs because they thought loads of money, and I think it's actually just going to create
ETFs.
more financial control. And I think it's just basically taking Bitcoin and making it part of them, inverted commas.
Yeah. That's the one thing that. There's a lot of nuance, right? The ETFs, everyone knows that it's BS, right? It's just price manipulation, and they actually control the Bitcoin, and then you're never going to get the Bitcoin. You just get like a share or a derivative of the actual Bitcoin itself. So,
they have physical ETFs, but yeah, they do have physical ETFs.
Yeah, but I feel like if shit really hits the fan, are they going to give you your Bitcoin? Like. You know what I mean?
How big the shit is, right?
Yeah. So this is how I kind of view it. So I'm like, it's just like one of those gotchas, But yeah, there's a lot of nuance, I think, with Bitcoin. But what I would say is, at the end of the day, if everything does shift to a Bitcoin standard, and this ideological sort of monetary shift or paradigm shift, I think that the people who provide goods and services and the skills and the problem solvers win, regardless of what the medium of exchange is. Because it doesn't matter if it's a liquidity, if you have more liquidity, you still need goods and services, and that those goods and services still circulate within the economy, right? So at a certain point, everybody would essentially get richer in a sense, because the goods and services would decrease over time, because the competition would, they would be competing for a limited amount of market share with a limited amount of problems to solve, in that type of example. But I don't know. Maybe you have a different contrarian. I love your contrarian point of view. Yeah. Let me know, man. Let me know. I love your contrarian points of view.
The entire global north has an aging population, while 70% of Africa is aged 30 and younger. Less humans plus high inflation means that businesses make less money, but it doesn't have to be you. Helicode is your one-stop shop for cheap, affordable, and most importantly, quality Web3 labor. Find out more at helicode.xyz, and as always, see you, Space Cowboy.
Like I say, because I think there'll be an eventual collapse of money, right? And
Of course.
I do feel that, I think Bitcoin is being co-opted. I think it's a fantastic store of value if you want a relatively safe, long-term investment. but I don't think it's going to radicalize the financial system as we hoped it would. And I think it's partly because of them and ETFs and that kind of stuff. And I think I mentioned this before, and certainly when I wrote the Tao of Tao, I was talking about these three metaverses, metavi, and the
Hmm.
idea is that there will be a corporate one, and eventually, you look at things like Apple and X, well, not X yet, but will be, and Nvidia and so on. They have like income and value higher than nations, and
Yeah.
there's going to be a point where they will go, you know what, nations are being run badly, and I'm sick of trying to avoid or let's say expedite taxes, and I don't need this regulation, I don't need this thing. Why don't I just become an extra entity, which is not a nation, but it's a corporate, and I have my own currency? And if you want to buy and interact with me, then that's the way you do it. And each potential large corp could end up having their own internal financial systems which all interact just like the global economy does today. And I think that corporatist world may well be one of the things that comes. And that's kind of dystopian. Then there'll be a CBDC, central bank, and the rump nations that are left over. They will be using that, and people will have identities in each. And then there will be that underlying underweb, torrent, kind of dark web, whatever you want to call it, right? I personally envisage that as being layer U, which is my AR AI network, which is for the credits token. And the idea will be is you have an identity in all three of those metavi, right? One is going to be the really bright, horrible corporate, but nevertheless necessary method. One is going to be your utilities and your taxation and your property in terms of your CBDC. And the other one will be your dark web or whatever you want to do, freedom layer, where you can do whatever you want to do with whoever you want to do outside of rules and regulations. And there will be frictions between all three. And it's kind of semi-dystopian, but until we get to the we're over money point, that's probably one of the growing pains we have to go through, right? And I still think that that's going to happen. It won't be a single dark web coin. There'll be many of them, and people will work in those networks, and there will be interaction points. As it is today, if you think about it, it's like a spider's web, right? And there are people who are interacting in the dark side of crypto, and there's even people who are interacting in the positive side of crypto, but just don't want to pay taxes. We know people do that kind of stuff, right? And they're in and
Yeah.
out of dexes and whatever, and they know that people do that, right?
Yeah.
I personally feel it's better to pay taxes because I'm very social and communitarian, and I feel it's more important to hang on to those vestigial rumps of nations right now to ensure that they can develop and survive for as long as possible. If you are avoiding taxes, rich people out there, or even middle class people out there, you are doing your country a disservice. Because it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with the politics that are implemented by that country. If you are not helping to fund it, whatever it's trying to do, it will do less efficiently. Just as you look at any business out there, if you choke out its development cash, it's not going to do very well. People seem to think it's okay to bag on a country and bag on a government and not pay their dues. What did they do for me? What did they... Hey, you're not getting bombed right now, dude. The reason why you're not getting bombed right now is because your country has an army and that is giving you security and safety. Your water
Yeah.
is running, your electricity is running, all the shit that people take for granted. That's why people need to pay their taxes. And that sounds like a horrible thing from a libertarian like me, but that's really
Um,
what people need to do. They have to pay.
okay, man, you said a lot. So, with the taxes, man, with the taxes. Okay, let's stay on this. Let's stay on this for now. You said a lot there.
Okay.
Let's. So with the taxes, I guess because I've been studying money for about 4.5 years, and I guess I'll just start by asking this: Do you think that because the way the mechanisms of money work today, we get taxed multiple times, right?
Yes.
Through the form of money printing and debasement, through when we want to send money maybe internationally to another person, through when we want to withdraw money in an ATM, through sales tax in some countries, through property tax, through so many different means of tax. So I guess my question to you is, what is the point if me and you both understand the mechanisms of kind of how money works? What's the point of me stressing to file? It's just again hypothetical. I'm not saying I'm not trying to, but what is the point of me filing to take money that I've earned and give back to the government in the form of tax when they're already taxing me through inflation? When it just makes sense to just to steal that 2, 3, 4, whatever that inflation rate is, percentage that you need.
I know what you mean, and obviously that's why people have accountants, so they can structure their taxes accordingly, and provided they are not evading tax, then that's allowed,
of course,
right?
Of
That's
course,
why big corporations get away with paying such small amounts. But that's also why the tax burden for the average person feels so terrible, right? Because the big ones don't pay the fair, equitable share. Now, certainly America is a slightly different use case for this taxation situation, because you've also got the federal and state taxes and everything else, and it is a big chunk of allegedly low taxation, but it's low taxation because by the time you get there you've already paid tax a few times. I get that, but tax is also a methodology of taking money out of circulation and bringing it to the government. The problem is when government spending is out of control, the balance is not there. Now, I'm not saying that what the US or the UK or a lot of European countries is doing with the taxation that they get is correct, and that's something for politics to decide. The problem then is it's not lowest common denominator demagoguery politics or division partisan politics about them and us. It's about, oh, hang on, maybe we as a citizen should actually pay more attention to what policy is in our country and affect a change by either lobbying, being politically active, being active citizens within our country, and then getting enough people to agree about something that we can enforce and enact a policy change. Because quite often we feel like we're on the outside because we disagree with what they're doing, and we'll whinge about it online and we'll moan about it, and we may even go to a rally about it, but really you're not doing anything about it. You know, you're not necessarily writing to your MP because that's for the boring people to do. But maybe you should write to your MP. Maybe he should realise that his position is at jeopardy if he doesn't do what his constituents want. Now, if you then go to a smaller country like Sweden, or you go to a smaller country like any of the Scandinavians, quite high taxation, but also and quite so-called soft on crime kind of policies and so on. But people don't reoffend when they've done a crime. Right, so their recidivism rate is really, really low. That's just one example, right? But they also have universal free healthcare for everybody in the country. They also have a pretty high standard of education for everybody in the country. So, America was most successful in the post-war years, the 50s, when the top rate of tax was 90%. And there's also a question to ask yourself, well, how many billions do people really need? I mean, the reality is, free market people will say you should be able to keep going forever and accrue as much wealth as you possibly want. But when you know that there is somebody who maybe is living on $100 a month or less, forget it, somebody with no income at all and no social safety network in, say, continental Africa or in some regions of Southeast Asia, and they are literally potentially starving unless they have a charitable handout from a different source, and yet some people can have more than 2/3 of the wealth of the planet. Is that equitable? Is that fair? Is that person going to have the same quality of opportunity to then grow up with an education, with the safety net of health, with the safety net of a secure environment to live in, to one day earn their way to get 2/3 of the world's wealth? I don't think so. I'm sorry. There is no equality of opportunity. So those things need to be rectified. And I'm not saying I have any of the solutions to them, and monetary policy is just a small part of a very complex picture. But people, humanity, need to be more politically aware. And full kudos here. I did train to become a citizenship teacher in England. And citizenship in England is not about active citizenry in terms of doing certain things for your country. It's about being an active participant in your society. And that's one of the policies that I actually think was quite good. They did actually make it a national, but it's a bagged on subject. Hardly anybody pays attention to the subject, and nobody really becomes aware about it. But the reality, I think, is if you want to be part of society and you want the right to complain about society, you better know what you could have done to change it first.
Hey bro, I'm Just Trolling is something that will not just challenge your perspective, but also touch your heart and soul. It's a book that defies convention, blending art and literature into a thought-provoking masterpiece. A reflective piece of provocative art that tackles societal constructs from angles you've never considered. Hey bro, I'm Just Trolling delves into the very essence of our existence. It questions the technology that surrounds us, challenges our notions of beauty, stares unflinchingly into the eyes of death, and questions the boundaries of freedom. It scrutinized the educational system that molds our very future. This book is a journey, an exploration of shared human experience,
and it's a work of art that refuses to be confined by tradition. It's a canvas painted with words, a melody of thought, and a testament to the power of creativity in a world dominated by algorithms and data. Visit moonboycapitalventures.com and get your hands on Hey Bro, I'm Just Trolling today. It's not just a book, it's a movement. Now let's jump back into the show.
Yeah, a couple things there. I would say one thing is you should vote. You should vote with your dollar or whatever currency that everyone uniformly agrees upon within your society to exchange, or whatever that medium of exchange is. You should vote with that first and foremost. If you're not happy with policies, then just take your money because money is just another terminology for like influence, right? You're just buying an influence of something. And another thing too, I would say, it's very, very complex, right? The situation at hand. But what I would say too as well is I actually don't think that politicians, for the most part, in most societies, not all, are in control. I actually think the corporations are, because in the global north they call it lobbying. In the global south they call it bribery. I mean, it's the same thing, and they buy influence with their dollars or whatever uniformly agreed upon currency for medium exchange is, and then they're able to impose changes that suits their interest, right?
So in US society, just to add on that, right? So originally there used to be a thing called Hecklow's Iron Triangle, and the idea was that the three branches, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive, and they would form US policy. Then in the 70s, Carter and Freeman came up with a concept called issue policy networks, and they said, no, it's not a triangle, it's a cat's cradle, it's a web, and everybody's got a hand on the string, and they may have a hand on multiple strings because of single issues. So I might potentially be socially liberal. So I might be pro-life, not pro-life, what's the other one? Pro-choice, okay? So somebody might want the people to have to choose whether or not they have an abortion or not, and another person might want guns. So one is potentially a right-wing ideology, the other one is potentially a left-wing ideology. But because of the amount of fracturing and division within the US and the power of single-issue lobbyists, I could have a hand on one string which is opposite to the string that I want. So I might pay money to the NRA, let's say, and be pro-gun, but I also might pay money to the Planned Parenthood outfit, and that's actually opposed to that one. So you don't end up with an iron triangle where you can formulate what policy will be anymore. It's a policy web. And I wrote in my undergrad, way back in US Society of Politics section under Dr. Stephen Riley, who is an expert on American exceptionalism, and I really loved learning from him. And I wrote about how it really should expand to internationally wound policy webs. And everybody, whether you act or inact in your political life, you are pulling on multiple threads. As a guy, as a woman, as a ethnicity, as a religion, as a crypto person, as whatever kind of strand you have, your hand is on multiple webs all the time. And even if you're not pulling the web, you are distorting the web field to create global policy. And sure, it is unfair that many in the developing world strength of pull is less, even though democratically and population-wise there are more of them in the developing nations than there are in the developed nations. There is no democracy in the world, right? There is no rule of the general will of the majority, which also leads to, I know you want to talk about the Telegram thing later, that actually informs something else, which is a political concept. Ironically, we're doing so much politics and less crypto, but democracy and tyranny of the majority, right? And the idea is that in a civil society, the reason why we don't have the majority victimizing and destroying the minorities is because we have built in these checks and balances between the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. Now, if you've got all these outside influencing money things that donate in PACs or super PACs or lobbyists or whatever you want to call it, you are distorting the framework that the Constitution was built on in America and even our unwritten Constitution in the UK. The concept of having the separation of powers is meant to protect society from itself. The reason of having a government is to protect your nation from outsiders and protect your society from itself. People talk about, we study in politics a thing called the social contract. I talk about this with an American. He's like, I didn't sign no contract. You did, dude, because you were born in that country. And there is no anarchism. You are in a country. It already exists because people before you fought us, the British, in order to become independent and rule and have your own decision-making process. It's like vast majority of people are ignorant to political process. People hate politics, but you engage in politics anytime you don't resort to violence to resolve a difference. That's what politics is. Politics is getting change without violence. That is the point of politics. But people see professional politics, they see money politics, and they feel like it's totally alien from what they do when they argue with somebody about sports at the pub. But it's the same thing. Yeah. It's exactly the same thing. These guys are professional arguers, okay? And they're also professional because they're taking your money in order to argue on your behalf, but don't ever represent what you want. That's the issue. People need to learn this shit for themselves, right? You can't piss and moan about something if you're not going to get off your ass and do it yourself. There should be more, and whether you agree with it or not, AOC stood from a position who is not a professional politician, who has worked her way into politics to represent the views that she believes in. If you disagree with her, get off your ass, become a politician, and disagree with her. That is the joy of politics. No one is saying you can't be a politician. In America, in the UK, if you disagree with what's going on, one of the foundational things of the constitutions of those countries is that anybody can be represented. You just got to be a citizen. You got to be a certain age. And I don't think you can be a criminal, or maybe they changed that law recently. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But as long as you're basically not a criminal, and basically as long as you're a citizen, you can go and try and represent your views in government. And don't play the game by their rules. If you don't like their rules and you don't like their methodology, don't do that, and see how far you can go into it. And I bet you get corrupted, because unfortunately they're all run by those shadowy lobbyists, right? And people's heads turn towards money, which is why I hate money. Anyway, but so you want to talk about
sorry, but I just want to say one more question before we move on. Man, this is so fun. Like, I haven't even gotten to any of the topics. What is the thing with you, man? You're just like a really, really good talker, man. It's like, but okay, wait. I have one more question about this because this is such an interesting topic. So, liquidity, right? If you were to get into politics, wouldn't liquidity become an issue at some point?
Only because there is money in politics. So the way to fix that is to say, right, no more money in politics. Pass a law. No more companies as human beings can funding PACs. That'd be another great law to pass. Get the money out of politics. Give state mandated adverts equally to all the candidates up to an X limit. There you go. Boom. Government can pay for that. No private donors. No private corruption. That's the way to solve that. But they're never going to do it because they're all making money out of it.
And how do you track that? Because even now we even have crypto. So how do you track, people not getting persuaded or lobbied, in the back end,
Well, that's where your taxes should be spent on a good federal kind of electoral commission. So in Britain, we have an electoral commission that is relatively independent, and it does check to make sure there isn't corruption and stuff like that going on. And in the main, we're pretty not corrupt in the UK. Yes, there are some things that have cropped up, and yes, they've been found out, and we get them for it. But in the main, it's just not a cultural thing for us so much now. There is that whole British acting gentlemanly thing, right?
Yeah.
It's rare. But in America, it's institutionalized and accepted. Eddie Murphy's Distinguished Gentleman. Watch that. We watch that in A-level politics, right? As actually a good grounding on how America works. Because it is pretty much legit. That's how it does work. It's a pretty good movie as well. So I highly recommend that if you want to get a handle on how bad American politics is. It hasn't changed. It's only got worse.
Yeah. I mean, we all can visibly see that if you don't ignore your eyeballs, right?
Stay tuned for part 2. And as always, see you, Space Cowboy.